Welcome, weary soul. You've come here tonight carrying something heavy, haven't you? Maybe you're running from something God has asked you to do, or perhaps you feel like you've made mistakes that are too big to forgive. Tonight, as we journey through the story of Jonah together, you're going to discover something beautiful about God's heart for you. You're going to experience God's relentless love, the kind that pursues you even when you run, that rescues you even when you resist, and that forgives you even when you fail. This ancient story isn't just about a man and a whale. It's about a God who never gives up on his children. That includes you. Let your breathing slow down now. Feel your body sinking into whatever surface supports you. Release the tension in your shoulders, your jaw, your mind. God is here with you in this quiet moment. Father, we invite your presence into this time of rest. Speak to our hearts through Jonah's story. Remind us that we are loved, pursued, and never beyond your grace. Amen. Maybe you're feeling like you're running right now, not physically, but emotionally, spiritually, running from what God might be asking of you, running from difficult conversations, hard decisions, uncomfortable truths. You feel that restless anxiety, that sense that you're avoiding something important, don't you? Jonah felt this too. Listen to how his story begins. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. Jonah 1:1-3 Jonah ran. This prophet, this man of God, heard clearly what he was supposed to do and chose the opposite direction. Does that feel familiar tonight? Maybe you know what you should do. Have that difficult conversation. Forgive that person. Take that step of faith. But instead, you find yourself heading toward Tarshish, away from God's voice. Here's what I want you to understand. God doesn't love you less when you run. Your hesitation, your fear, your resistance, it doesn't surprise him or disappoint him the way you think it does. He knows your heart. He understands why Nineveh feels too big, too hard, too scary. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed right now, like the waves of life are crashing over you, one after another, and you can't catch your breath. You wonder if this is punishment, if God has forgotten you in the storm. Listen to what happened when Jonah's ship encountered the storm. But the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God. Jonah 1:4-5. The storm wasn't random. It wasn't meaningless chaos. God sent it, not to destroy, but to redirect. Sometimes what feels like your life falling apart is actually God's way of getting your attention, of bringing you back to where you need to be. You might be in a storm right now that feels overwhelming. Bills you can't pay, relationships that are breaking, health issues that terrify you, decisions that feel impossible. Your ship feels like it's about to break up, doesn't it? But storms in God's hands are never just about destruction. They're about redirection, about rescue, about bringing you home. The sailors were afraid and cried out to their gods. But notice something beautiful here. Even in the storm, even when Jonah was running, God was working. He was present. He was orchestrating something that would ultimately lead to salvation. Not just for Jonah, but for an entire city. Maybe you're feeling guilty tonight, ashamed, like you've made such a mess of things that God couldn't possibly want to use you anymore. You wonder if you've disqualified yourself from his plans, if you've run too far to find your way back. Jonah felt this way too. When the sailors discovered he was running from God, listen to what he said. Pick me up and throw me into the sea, and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. Jonah 1:12. Jonah was ready to give up, ready to let the consequences of his running destroy him. He believed his disobedience had put others in danger, that the best thing he could do was remove himself from the equation entirely. Maybe you've felt this way, that your mistakes, your failures, your running has hurt the people you love so much that you'd rather disappear than face the damage. But watch what God does. Watch his heart. Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried out to the Lord, "Please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, Lord, have done as you pleased." Jonah 1:13-1:4. Even the pagan sailors showed more mercy toward Jonah than Jonah showed toward himself. They fought to save him. They didn't want to throw him overboard. And notice what they said. They recognized that God was sovereignly at work, that this was all part of a bigger plan. Sometimes the people around you can see God's grace in your situation more clearly than you can. When you're drowning in shame and regret, when you're convinced that you deserve whatever consequences come your way, remember that God often surrounds you with people who reflect his heart toward you, people who fight for you even when you've given up on yourself. Maybe you feel swallowed up right now, completely overwhelmed, like you're in a dark place with no way out, and you can't see any light, any hope, any possibility of rescue. Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Jonah 1:17. A fish swallowed Jonah. Complete darkness, complete helplessness. But notice the word provided. God provided the fish. This wasn't punishment, this was rescue. What looked like death was actually salvation. The thing that seemed like it would destroy Jonah was actually the very thing that would save him and transport him to where he needed to go. Your dark place tonight. That overwhelming situation, that impossible circumstance, that feeling of being completely out of control. What if it's not your end? What if it's your rescue? What if God has provided this very situation to transport you to exactly where you need to be? In the belly of the fish, in the complete darkness, Jonah finally prayed. Not before, when he was running, not during the storm, when he was ready to give up, but in the lowest moment, in the place that looked most hopeless. That's when he finally turned toward God. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, "In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead I called for help, and you listened to my voice." Jonah 2:1-2. From deep in the realm of the dead, that's where you might be tonight. Feeling buried alive by your circumstances, your choices, your pain. But notice what Jonah discovered. God listens from there. Your lowest moment is not beneath God's attention. Your darkest hour is not beyond his reach. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. Jonah 2:7. When your life feels like it's ebbing away, when hope is fading, when you can barely breathe under the weight of it all, that's when remembrance becomes rescue. Remembering who God is, remembering what he's done, remembering that he's never failed to provide a way through. And the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Jonah 2:10. Dry land, solid ground, a new beginning. The fish that swallowed him delivered him safely to shore. What looked like the end became the beginning. What felt like destruction became deliverance. Maybe you're feeling resistant tonight, like God is asking, something of you that feels too hard, too scary, too beyond your abilities. You love God, but this particular thing he's asking, it feels impossible. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you. Jonah 3:1-2. A second time, God didn't give up. After all the running, the resistance, the time in the fish, God gave the same calling again. Your delays, your detours, your need for rescue, none of it changes God's plan for your life. He's still calling you to the same purpose, the same mission, the same beautiful plan he had from the beginning. Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh. Jonah 3:3. After everything, the running, the storm, the fish, the fear, Jonah finally said yes. And notice what happened when he did. Jonah began by going a day's journey into the city, proclaiming, 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. The Ninevites believed God. Jonah 3:4-5. One day, just one day of obedience, and an entire city turned to God. All those years of running, all that fear about what would happen if he obeyed, and when he finally said yes, God moved powerfully through him. Your yes might feel small, inadequate, insufficient. You might think your obedience won't matter much, that you're too flawed or too late to be useful to God. But Jonah's story reminds us that God can use one day of obedience to change everything. Let your breathing deepen. Feel your body relaxing. You're not just hearing about Jonah tonight. You're discovering that his story is your story. The running, the rescue, the resistance, the redemption, it's all part of how God works in human hearts, including yours. You are not too far gone. You have not missed your moment. God's call on your life is still there, waiting for your yes. And when you give it, however imperfectly, however fearfully, he will do immeasurably more than you could ask or imagine. Your heart is racing, isn't it? That familiar anxiety creeping in as your mind starts spinning through all the what-ifs, all the things that could go wrong, all the ways you might fail. Maybe it's about that conversation you need to have, that decision you need to make, that step you need to take. The fear feels so real, so overwhelming, like it's going to swallow you whole. Jonah knew this feeling. When God first called him to go to Nineveh, the fear must have been paralyzing. Nineveh wasn't just any city. It was the capital of Assyria, Israel's most feared enemy. These were the people who had terrorized his nation, who were known for their cruelty and violence. God was asking him to go into the heart of enemy territory and preach against their wickedness. Imagine the thoughts that must have raced through Jonah's mind. What if they kill me? What if they torture me? What if I fail? What if God doesn't protect me? What if this destroys everything I've built, everything I am? The anxiety of it, the sheer terror, it drove him to run as far as he could in the opposite direction. Your Nineveh might not be a city. It might be that phone call you need to make, that relationship you need to address, that boundary you need to set, that truth you need to speak. It feels too big, too dangerous, too likely to end badly. The anxiety tells you that obedience equals destruction, that saying yes to God means saying yes to disaster. But here's what Jonah discovered, and what you need to know tonight. Our fear is usually much larger than our actual circumstances. The anticipation of suffering is often worse than the suffering itself, and sometimes what we're most afraid of is exactly where God wants to do his greatest work. When Jonah finally obeyed and went to Nineveh, something beautiful happened. The very people he feared, the very situation he was terrified of, it became the scene of one of the greatest spiritual revivals in history. His fear had painted a picture of certain destruction, but God's reality was abundant life. Your racing heart tonight, those anxious thoughts spinning, they're not prophetic. They're not telling you the future. They're just fear doing what fear does, trying to protect you by convincing you that the worst-case scenario is the only scenario. But Jonah's story reminds us that God's scenarios are often beyond our imagination, better than our best hopes. Maybe you're angry tonight, frustrated. Life hasn't gone the way you thought it would, and frankly, you're mad at God about it. You've tried to do the right thing. You've tried to follow him. But instead of blessing, you've gotten storms. Instead of smooth sailing, you've been swallowed by circumstances you never saw coming. Jonah was angry too, furiously angry. After Nineveh repented and God showed them mercy, listen to Jonah's response. But to Jonah this seemed very wrong, and he became angry. He prayed to the Lord, "Isn't this what I said, Lord, when I was still at home? That is what I tried to forestall by fleeing to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity." Jonah 4:1 to 2 Jonah was angry at God, for being gracious and compassionate, for showing mercy to people who didn't deserve it, for not punishing the way Jonah thought they should be punished. He was mad because God's way of doing things didn't match his expectations. Maybe you're angry because God's way of handling your situation doesn't match your expectations either. You thought if you were faithful, life would be easier. You thought if you obeyed, doors would open smoothly. You thought if you trusted, things would work out the way you hoped. And instead, you got storms and fish and unexpected detours. Your anger is understandable. It's even acceptable to God. Notice that Jonah expresses his anger directly to the Lord in prayer. God can handle your frustration. He's not threatened by your honest emotions. But your anger doesn't change who he is or how he works. Jonah was angry because God was too merciful. Maybe you're angry because God seems not merciful enough toward your situation. But here's what both reveal. Sometimes we want God to be God in some areas, but not in others. We want His grace for us, but His judgment for others. We want His sovereignty when it serves us, but not when it challenges us. The beautiful thing about Jonah's story is that even in his anger, even in his petulant demand that God explain Himself, God doesn't abandon him. God doesn't write him off as ungrateful or difficult. Instead, He gently teaches him, using a plant and a worm to help Jonah understand his heart. Your anger tonight doesn't disqualify you from God's love. Your frustration with how He's handling things doesn't put you outside His care. He's patient with your questions, gentle with your doubts, understanding of your disappointment. Maybe you're feeling forgotten tonight, like God has moved on to other people, other plans, other purposes, and left you behind. You see Him working in other people's lives, answering other people's prayers, blessing other people's obedience, and you wonder if He even remembers you exist. Jonah might have felt forgotten during those 3 days in the fish, alone in the darkness, with no way to save himself, completely dependent on a God who seemed to have disappeared. Where was the rescue? Where was the relief? Had God forgotten His prophet in the belly of the sea creature? But God hadn't forgotten. Every moment of those 3 days was carefully orchestrated. The fish was provided by God, not as punishment, but as rescue. It was keeping Jonah alive while transporting him to exactly where he needed to be. What felt like abandonment was actually the most intimate care. Your dark season, your time in the belly of difficult circumstances, it doesn't mean God has forgotten you. It might mean He's transporting you, moving you from where you were running to where you need to be, protecting you while He repositions you, keeping you alive while He prepares your next chapter. From deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help, and you listened to my voice. From the deepest, darkest, most hopeless place, God was listening. Your feeling of being forgotten is just that, a feeling. The reality is that every prayer you've cried from your dark place has reached His ears. Every moment of your struggle has been witnessed by His eyes. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. You are being carried. Maybe you feel worthless tonight, like you've made too many mistakes, run too many times, failed too spectacularly to be useful to God anymore. You look at other people who seem to have it together, who seem to hear from God clearly and obey immediately, and you wonder if you've disqualified yourself from His purposes. Jonah failed spectacularly. He disobeyed directly. He ran from a clear calling. He was bitter and angry even after God used him powerfully. He pouted when God showed mercy. If anyone should have been written off as a failed prophet, it would be Jonah. But look at how his story ends. Even in his anger, even in his childish demand that God let him die because he didn't like how things turned out, God speaks to him with gentleness and patience. The Lord said, "Is it right for you to be angry?" Jonah 4:4. Not condemnation, not rejection, a question, an invitation to examine his heart, an opportunity to see things from God's perspective. Even at Jonah's worst moment, God was still teaching him, still working with him, still committed to his growth. Your failures don't disqualify you. Your running doesn't remove you from God's purposes. Your struggles with obedience don't make you unusable. If anything, they make you more relatable, more human, more authentic when God does use you. The people of Nineveh didn't repent because Jonah was perfect. They repented because God's message was true, regardless of the flawed messenger. Your value to God isn't based on your performance. It's based on His love and His choice to work through imperfect people. Maybe you're feeling hopeless about change tonight. You've been struggling with the same issues for so long, the same fears, the same patterns, the same resistance to what God is calling you toward. You wonder if you'll ever grow, ever change, ever become the person God wants you to be. The story of Jonah is the story of change. Not instant change, not easy change, but real change. From running to obedience, from fear to faith, from self-centeredness to seeing God's heart for others. The change didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't always comfortable, but it was real. Jonah learned that God's ways are higher than his ways. He learned that mercy is better than judgment. He learned that God's heart is bigger than his heart. He learned that obedience leads to blessing, even when it's scary. You're learning too. Every storm you weather, every time you choose trust over fear, every moment you say yes instead of running, you're changing. The growth might feel slow, the progress might feel minimal, but transformation is happening. God is patient with the process. He's committed to completing the work He started in you. Let your breathing slow down. Feel the tension leaving your shoulders. These struggles you're facing tonight, the anxiety, the anger, the feelings of being forgotten or worthless or hopeless about change, they're all part of your story, just like they were part of Jonah's story. And Jonah's story didn't end with his struggles. It ended with understanding, with growth, with a bigger picture of who God is and how He works. Your story isn't ending with tonight's struggles either. They're just one chapter in a bigger narrative of grace, growth, and God's relentless love pursuing you. You're wondering if God still has a plan for your life, aren't you? After all the detours, all the mistakes, all the times you've run in the wrong direction, you wonder if His original purpose for you is still intact, or if you've forfeited it through your failures. Listen to this beautiful promise that Jonah's story reveals. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you. Jonah 3:1-2, a second time. After the running, after the storm, after the fish, after everything, God gave Jonah the exact same calling again, the same purpose, the same plan. His detour didn't derail God's destiny for his life. This means for you, your detours haven't derailed your destiny. The times you've run from God's voice, the seasons you've spent going in the wrong direction, the mistakes you've made, they haven't cancelled God's plan for your life. He's not giving you a consolation prize or a backup plan. He's offering you the same beautiful purpose He had in mind from the beginning. Maybe you think you've lost too much time, made too many wrong turns. His callings don't get rescinded because of delays. What He intended for you before your failures is still what He intends for you after them. Your story isn't over. It's just taken a longer route to the same beautiful destination. You're afraid you're not qualified for what God is asking you to do. You look at the size of your Nineveh, that calling, that purpose, that step He's asking you to take, and you feel utterly inadequate. Who are you to speak into that situation? Who are you to take on that responsibility? Who are you to think you could make a difference? Here's God's promise revealed through Jonah's experience. Jonah began by going a day's journey into the city, proclaiming, 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. The Ninevites believed God. A proclamation was issued throughout the city that everyone must fast and put on sackcloth. Jonah 3:4-6. One day, Jonah preached for one day, and the entire city of Nineveh, 120,000 people, turned to God. The most powerful empire on earth humbled itself before the Lord because of the words of one reluctant prophet. This means for you, God doesn't need your perfection to accomplish His purposes. He doesn't need your confidence, your eloquence, or your impressive credentials. He needs your availability. Jonah was fearful, reluctant, and still processing his own encounter with God's mercy. And yet God used him to bring about the greatest revival in ancient history. Your inadequacy isn't a disqualification. It's an invitation for God to show His strength through your weakness. When you feel too small for the task, too unprepared for the calling, too flawed for the purpose, you're exactly where God can do His greatest work. He specializes in using ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. You're worried that you've hurt people by your running, by your resistance, by your delays in saying yes to God. You think about the relationships that have been strained, the opportunities that have been missed, the damage that's been done while you were figuring things out. Look at this promise in Jonah's story. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened. Jonah 3:10. God relented. He changed course when he saw repentance. The destruction that seemed inevitable was cancelled because hearts changed. What looked like irreversible damage was completely reversed. This means for you, it's not too late to change the trajectory of your relationships, your circumstances, your future. The damage from your running phase isn't permanent. The consequences of your delays don't have to be final. When God sees genuine turning in your heart, in your choices, in your direction, he can relent from anything that seemed set in stone. Your relationships can be restored. Your opportunities can be renewed. Your testimony can be redeemed. The very areas where you feel you've caused the most damage can become the places where God displays his greatest mercy and grace. You're convinced that you're too stubborn, too set in your ways, too resistant to really change. You've tried before and failed. You've made commitments and broken them. You wonder if you're just doomed to repeat the same patterns forever. Here's what Jonah's transformation reveals. But the Lord said, "You have been concerned about this plant, though you did not tend it or make it grow. And should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh, in which there are more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left?" Jonah 4:10-11. God was patient with Jonah's process. Even after the great revival in Nineveh, Jonah was still learning, still growing, still having his perspective corrected by God. The story doesn't end with perfect Jonah. It ends with patient God still teaching stubborn Jonah about love and mercy. This means for you, God is patient with your process. Your growth doesn't have to be instant or perfect for him to keep working with you. He's not frustrated by how long it's taking you to change. He's not giving up because you're still learning, still making mistakes, still needing correction. Change is happening, even when it doesn't feel like it. Every conversation God has with your heart, every gentle correction, every moment of clarity, it's all part of a transformation process that he's committed to completing. You don't have to have it all figured out before he can use you. He works with you right where you are, while he's changing you into who you're becoming. You feel like God is asking too much of you. The calling feels overwhelming. The task feels impossible. The responsibility feels too heavy. You want to obey, but you also want to survive, and you're not sure you can do both. Look at this beautiful promise in how God provided for Jonah. Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Jonah 1:17. God provided. In the moment of greatest danger, when Jonah should have drowned, God provided rescue in the most unexpected way. Not a ship, not a rescue team, but a fish. The very thing that looked like destruction was actually salvation. This means for you, God will provide what you need for what he's calling you to do. It might not look like what you expect. It might not come in the package you would choose. But provision will come. The resources, the strength, the courage, the wisdom, whatever you need for your Nineveh, God will provide. You don't have to figure out how you're going to do it before you say yes. You don't have to see the whole staircase before you take the first step. God's provision often comes in response to obedience, not in advance of it. When you move toward your calling, you'll discover that what you need for the journey is already on its way. You're afraid that if you fully surrender to God's plan, you'll lose yourself, your happiness, your freedom. You worry that obedience means a life of grim duty and joyless service. Consider what happened when Nineveh repented. From the greatest to the least, everyone put on sackcloth and sat down in the dust. When Jonah's warning reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat down in the dust. Jonah 3:5-6, the most powerful king on earth, humbled himself. He laid down his crown, his robes, his position, everything that gave him worldly identity and power, and chose to seek God instead. And what was the result? Not destruction, but salvation. Not loss, but life. not emptiness, but grace. This means for you, surrender to God doesn't lead to loss, it leads to life. When you lay down your own plans, your own control, your own understanding of what will make you happy, you don't lose yourself. You find who you were really meant to be. The king of Nineveh discovered that humbling himself before God was better than sitting on a throne in rebellion. Your surrender will lead to the same discovery, that God's will for you is better than anything you could plan for yourself. His dreams for you are bigger than your dreams. His love for you is deeper than your self-protection. You're wondering if God really cares about you personally, or if you're just a small part of some bigger plan that would continue fine without you. You feel insignificant, replaceable, like one small fish in a very big ocean. Listen to how God spoke to Jonah about his heart. Should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh, in which there are more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and also many animals? Jonah 4:11. God was concerned, personally concerned, about every individual person in that city. He knew the exact number, 120,000. He cared about their confusion, their inability to distinguish right from left spiritually. He even cared about the animals. Nothing was too small for his attention. This means for you, you are not just a number in God's plan. You are not replaceable or insignificant. He knows you personally, individually, intimately. He's concerned about your struggles, your confusion, your need for direction. He cares about every detail of your life, every fear in your heart, every hope you carry. The same God who orchestrated storms and fish and revival for one rebellious prophet is the same God who orchestrates every detail of your life with personal love and care. You matter to him. Your story matters. Your yes matters. Your life has significance that extends far beyond what you can see. Let your breathing slow and deepen. These promises aren't just nice ideas. They're realities about who God is and how he works. The same God who worked in Jonah's story is working in yours. The same patience, provision, and purpose that marked Jonah's journey marks yours as well. Rest in these truths tonight. Your detours haven't derailed your destiny. Your inadequacy is an invitation for his strength. Your damage can be reversed. Your change is a process he's committed to. His provision will come. Your surrender leads to life. And you are personally, individually, intimately loved and cared for by the God of the universe. I know it's hard to believe right now. When you're in the middle of your storm, when you're sitting in the belly of your own difficult circumstances, when God feels distant and his promises feel uncertain, believing feels almost impossible, doesn't it? The doubt feels more real than the faith. The fear feels more convincing than the hope. You're not the first person to struggle with belief in the dark. Even Jonah, in the belly of the fish, had moments where faith was difficult. Listen to his honest prayer. You hurled me into the depths, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. I said, I have been banished from your sight. Yet I will look again toward your holy temple. Jonah 2-3-4. I have been banished from your sight. Jonah felt abandoned, forgotten, cut off from God's presence. In his darkest moment, his faith wavered. He wondered if God had written him off completely. But notice what comes next. Yet I will look again toward your holy temple. Even in his doubt, even when he felt banished, Jonah made a choice to turn his eyes back toward God. Not because he felt faithful, but because he chose faith in spite of his feelings. This means for you, doubt doesn't disqualify your faith, it reveals your humanity. The fact that you're struggling to believe doesn't mean you're not a person of faith. It means you're honest about how hard it is to trust when you can't see the outcome, to hope when circumstances look hopeless. Your faith doesn't have to be perfect to be real. You don't have to eliminate all doubt before God will work in your situation. Like Jonah, you can say, I'm struggling to believe, but I choose to look toward you anyway. That's enough. That's faith. Maybe you're wondering if God is really in control, or if life is just random chaos with no divine hand guiding anything. The storms feel too violent, The circumstances feel too overwhelming. The pain feels too senseless for there to be a loving God orchestrating it all. But look at what Jonah discovered about God's sovereignty. But the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Jonah 1-4, 1:17, 2:10. The Lord sent. Lord provided. The Lord commanded. 3 times in this story, we see that what looked like random chaos was actually divine orchestration. The storm wasn't an accident. God sent it. The fish wasn't a coincidence. God provided it. The rescue wasn't luck. God commanded it. This means for you, your storms are not random. Your circumstances are not chaotic accidents beyond God's awareness or control. What feels like your life falling apart might actually be God orchestrating a rescue you can't see yet. What looks like destruction might be divine redirection. You don't have to understand how God is working to trust that He is working. Jonah couldn't see the bigger picture from inside the fish, but God was weaving together storm and sea creature and stubborn prophet to bring about something beautiful. Not just Jonah's rescue, but an entire city's salvation. Your faith can rest in God's sovereignty even when you can't trace His hand. Even when the storms feel too strong and the fish feels too confining, you can trust that He's weaving together something good from what feels chaotic. Maybe you're struggling to believe that God could really use someone like you. You've made too many mistakes, resisted too many times, failed too spectacularly. You look at other people who seem to have strong faith and easy obedience, and you wonder if God could really work through someone as flawed as you feel. Look at who God chose to use in this story. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Jonah 1-3. Jonah ran. Deliberately, defiantly, completely. He didn't just hesitate or ask for clarification. He went in the opposite direction as fast as he could. If God was looking for perfect obedience, He picked the wrong person. But that's exactly the point. God doesn't choose people because they're perfect. He chooses them and makes them useful. Jonah's greatest sermon, the one that turned an entire city toward God, came after his most spectacular failure. His most powerful ministry happened after his most obvious rebellion. This means for you, your failures don't disqualify you from God's purposes. They prepare you for them. Your struggles with obedience don't make you useless. They make you humble. Your journey through rebellion and rescue gives you a testimony that perfect people could never have. God specializes in using broken people to do beautiful things. Your cracks aren't flaws to hide. They're places where His light shines through. Your story of running and returning, of failing and being rescued, of doubting and choosing faith anyway, that's exactly the kind of story He loves to use to reach other broken people. Maybe you're having trouble believing that change is really possible. You've been stuck in the same patterns for so long, fighting the same battles, struggling with the same resistance. You wonder if you're just destined to be someone who runs from God, someone who always chooses fear over faith. But watch Jonah's transformation throughout his story. Chapter 1. Jonah ran away from the Lord. Chapter 3. Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh, from running to obedience, from fear to faith, from resistance to surrender. The change was real, and it was dramatic. The man who fled as far as he could from God's calling became the man who walked into enemy territory to deliver God's message. This means for you, change is possible. Real change, dramatic change. The patterns that feel so entrenched, the habits that feel so permanent, the fears that feel so insurmountable, they can be transformed. You are not doomed to repeat the same cycles forever. But notice that the change didn't happen instantly. It happened through a process. Storm, fish, rescue, recommission. Jonah had to go through something to become someone different. Your transformation might involve difficult seasons too. It might require you to be uncomfortable for a while, but the process is producing something beautiful in you. Don't judge your potential by your past. Don't limit your future by your present struggles. The God who transformed Jonah from a runner into a revivalist is the same God who's working in your life right now. You're struggling to believe that God's plan is really better than your plan. Maybe your way seems more logical, more comfortable, more likely to succeed. God's way looks scary, uncertain, potentially painful. How can you trust that His way is truly better? Consider what Jonah's way led to versus God's way. Jonah's way, running toward Tarshish, led to a storm that endangered everyone on the ship, and ultimately to being swallowed by a fish. God's way, going to Nineveh, led to the greatest revival in ancient history, the salvation of 120,000 people, and Jonah becoming part of one of the most powerful demonstrations of God's mercy ever recorded. This means for you, God's way is always better, even when it doesn't look better at the beginning. Your way might seem safer, more reasonable, more under your control, but God's way leads to life, for you and for others who will be touched by your obedience. You can't see the end of the story from the middle. Jonah couldn't see the revival when he was afraid of Nineveh. You can't see the blessing when you're afraid of the calling. But God sees the whole story. He knows what your yes will produce. He knows who will be touched, what will be healed, what will be restored because you chose His way over your way. Your faith doesn't have to see the whole plan to take the next step. You don't have to understand all the reasons to trust the one who gives the directions. God's track record speaks for itself. His way leads to life, always. Maybe you're wondering if God really forgives completely, or if you'll always carry the consequences of your running season. You worry that even though you've turned back toward Him, there's still a debt to be paid, still punishment coming, still a record of failure that follows you. Look at how God treated Jonah after his rebellion. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you. Jonah 3:1-2, no lecture, no probation period, no reduced calling. God spoke to Jonah a second time with the exact same message, the same trust, the same calling. It was as if the running had never happened. The rescue became a reset. This means for you, God's forgiveness is complete. When you turn back to Him, when you say yes after saying no, He doesn't give you a lesser calling or a diminished purpose. He doesn't treat you like damaged goods or second-class children. You get the full inheritance, the full calling, the full trust. Your running season is not being held against you. Your resistance phase is not on your permanent record. Your struggle to obey is not disqualifying your future. When God looks at you, He sees who you're becoming, not just who you've been. Let your breathing slow. Feel your body releasing the tension of doubt and fear. Faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting the one who does. It's not about feeling certain. It's about choosing trust despite uncertainty. Jonah's faith wasn't perfect, but it was real. His belief wavered, but his choice to turn toward God in the darkness was enough. Your faith doesn't have to be stronger than your doubts to be sufficient. It just has to be real, honest, and pointed in the right direction. Tonight, choose faith, not because everything makes sense, but because God makes sense. Not because you can see the plan, but because you trust the planner. Not because the way is clear, but because the guide is faithful. Your mind has been wrestling all day, hasn't it? Like Jonah on that ship, tossing back and forth with the waves of worry, the storms of uncertainty. Even now, as you try to rest, thoughts keep coming. What you need to do tomorrow, what you should have done differently today, what might happen if you finally say yes to what God is asking of you. Let's return to that moment when Jonah finally found peace. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, "In my distress I called to the Lord, and He answered me." Jonah, 2:1 to 2 inches his distress, he called. In his darkest moment, in the place that felt most hopeless, Jonah finally stopped running and started praying. And listen to what he discovered. God answered. Not later, not when Jonah got his act together, not when he deserved it. God answered from the distress. In the distress, right there, in the belly of the fish, your distress tonight. Your racing thoughts, your worried heart, your restless spirit. It's not keeping God away. It's actually the perfect place to call out to Him. He doesn't wait for you to have it all together before He responds to your need for peace. Let your breathing slow down a little. Feel your body beginning to settle. God answered Jonah in the depths. He'll answer you in yours too. The sailors on Jonah's ship were exhausted, weren't they? Fighting against a storm that wouldn't stop, throwing cargo overboard, crying out to their gods for help. They were working so hard, straining against the wind and the waves, trying to save their lives through their own effort. Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Jonah 1:13. The harder they worked, the worse the storm became. Their striving wasn't bringing them closer to safety. It was wearing them out. Sometimes the answer isn't to row harder. Sometimes the answer is to recognize that there's a storm we can't control, and we need help that's bigger than our own strength. You've been rowing hard lately, haven't you? Trying to manage everything, fix everything, control everything. And the storm just keeps getting wilder. Your efforts, as sincere as they are, as exhausted as they've made you, they're not bringing you the peace you're seeking. Tonight, you can stop rowing. You can release your grip on the oars. Let God take control of the storm. Take a deeper breath. Feel your shoulders dropping. When Jonah was finally rescued, when the fish delivered him to dry land, do you know what he found? Solid ground, stable ground, a place where the waves couldn't toss him anymore, where the storm couldn't reach him. And the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Jonah 2:10 dry land. After all the chaos of the sea, after the terror of the storm, after the darkness of the fish, solid, stable, peaceful ground. A place to rest, to breathe, to stand firm again. God has dry land waiting for you too. A place of rest where the storms of today can't follow you, where the worries that have been tossing you around lose their power, where you can finally breathe and be still. Feel yourself sinking into that solid ground now, your body supported, held, safe. You know what's beautiful about Jonah's story? Even after all the running, all the resistance, all the drama, God still used him. When Jonah finally went to Nineveh, when he finally said yes, God did something incredible through him. Jonah began by going a day's journey into the city, proclaiming, 40 more days, and Nineveh will be overthrown. The Ninevites believed God. Jonah 3-4-5, 1 day of obedience, and an entire city turned toward God. All those years of running, all that fear about what would happen if he obeyed, and when he finally trusted God, something beautiful happened. Something bigger than anything Jonah could have imagined. Your yes. Whenever you're ready to give it, it's going to be beautiful too. Not because you're perfect, but because God's plans are perfect. Not because you're strong enough, but because He's strong enough to work through willing hearts. Let that thought settle into your spirit. You don't have to be ready for everything. You just have to be willing, and God will take care of the rest. Your breathing is slowing now. Can you feel it? The pace of your heart, settling, calming. When the people of Nineveh heard Jonah's message, they didn't panic. They didn't despair. They responded with hope. They believed that if they turned to God, He would show them mercy. And they were right. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, He relented and did not bring on them the destruction He had threatened. Jonah 3:10, He relented. He showed mercy. He turned away His anger and replaced it with grace. That's who God is. That's what He does when hearts turn toward Him. He meets turning with mercy. Whatever you're worried about tonight, whatever consequences you fear, whatever damage you think you've done, God is the God who relents, the God who shows mercy, the God who replaces judgment with grace when hearts turn toward Him. Your heart is turning toward Him even now. Can you feel it? Like a flower turning toward the sun, naturally, gently. without strain. Take another slow, deep breath, and as you exhale, let go of the need to figure everything out tonight. Even at the end of Jonah's story, he was still learning, still growing, still having his perspective gently corrected by a patient God. The transformation wasn't complete, the understanding wasn't perfect, but God was still there, still teaching, still loving, still patient with the process. But the Lord said, "You have been concerned about this plant. Should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh?" Jonah 4:10-11, God's final words in the story. Not condemnation, not frustration, but gentle teaching, patient explanation, loving correction. Even when Jonah was pouting, like a child, God spoke to him like a loving father. You don't have to have it all figured out before you rest tonight. God is patient with your process, patient with your questions, patient with your journey toward understanding. Your body is growing heavy now. Your mind is beginning to quiet. Let yourself sink deeper into rest. Picture Jonah on that dry land, finally safe, finally still, finally at peace after the storm. The sun warming his face, solid ground beneath him, the chaos of the sea just a memory now. That's where you are tonight, safe, still, held by a God who rescued you from your storms, who brought you through your dark places, who delivered you to this moment of rest. Your eyelids are growing heavy. There's nothing you need to do right now except rest. Nothing you need to figure out except how to breathe. Slowly, peacefully. The God who watched over Jonah in the belly of the fish is watching over you now, while you sleep. He doesn't slumber or sleep, so you can. Feel your whole body relaxing now, from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, letting go, releasing, sinking into peace. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. Psalm 23, 2-3. Green pastures, quiet waters. Your soul being refreshed, even as you rest. Your breathing is so peaceful now, in and out, like gentle waves on a calm shore. The same God who commanded the fish commands the night to bring you peace, commands your worries to be still, commands rest to come to your weary heart. You can let go now of all the things you've been carrying, all the decisions you've been wrestling with, all the fears that have been weighing you down. God's got it all while you rest. He's working while you sleep. He's orchestrating while you release. He's providing, just like he did for Jonah. He's doing for you. You are loved. You are held. You are safe. Tomorrow's mercies are new. Tomorrow's strength is sufficient. Tomorrow's grace is enough. But tonight, you can simply rest. Like Jonah on the dry land, peaceful, secure, home. You can rest now. You can sleep now. You are held. You are loved. Rest.